All right, let's get right into it. Politics can often feel like we're just stuck in the same old fights, right? Left versus right, war versus anti-war. But what if there's something deeper going on? A hidden choice that changes how we see everything? Well, today, we're unpacking a source that claims exactly that. It's arguing there's a historic battle between two worldviews, and it's reshaping our world as we speak.
And it all kind of kicks off with this pretty wild statement from Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, at first glance, yeah, it looks like a political bombshell. But our source material says, hold on, it's way more than that. The argument is that this quote is actually a key that unlocks a totally different way of seeing the political map, one that goes way beyond simple party lines.
So here's our game plan for breaking this all down. We're going to start with that Kennedy endorsement. Then, we'll get into the two competing systems that are at the very heart of this argument. From there, we'll look at the evidence the source points to in foreign policy and economics. And finally, we'll see how it all gets tied back to what the source calls a lost American tradition. Okay, first up, let's really dig into why that RFK Jr. quote is seen as being so important, at least according to our source. So the idea here, according to the source, isn't just, hey look, a Democrat is praising a Republican. It's about signaling a massive shift, something that just breaks our usual political boxes. I mean, by bringing up JFK and RFK, icons of 20th century liberalism, and connecting their legacy to Trump's policies, well, the claim is that RFK Jr. is pointing to a set of ideas that the usual news coverage is completely missing.
So, what is this deeper conflict, really? Let's get to the main event and see how the source actually defines these two opposing worldviews that it claims have been secretly at war for centuries.
And this really lays out the core argument. On one side, you have what the source calls the British system. Think of this as an empire-style foreign policy, free trade deals that tend to help global finance more than, say, local factories, and a banking system centered around the City of London, focused on moving money around the globe. But then on the other side, there's the American system. This is all about nations developing themselves, building up a real, productive economy with manufacturing and industry, and creating peace through construction, basically using big infrastructure projects to build alliances. The source claims that almost every big policy fight we see today is really a clash between these two big ideas.
Now, let's look at the first big piece of evidence the source offers up for this shift. It's a major change in how foreign policy is being done, and it uses the recent Iran conflict as a perfect example. The source highlights this headline from Chatham House, which is, the UK's top foreign policy think tank. It says, Britain's handling of the Iran war shows the limits of UK power. What's so wild about this is that the source is using the old order's own words to make its case. It's basically framed as them admitting failure, writing their own autopsy for the old way of doing things. So who's getting pushed aside here? Well, according to this view, it's the usual suspects, the power brokers we've seen running the show for decades, the UK, the EU, and NATO. The argument is that these were always the groups in charge of any big international crisis, but this source says, not anymore.
And stepping into their place is a new group. The source points to this quartet of nations: Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt. They're the ones now taking the lead on the diplomatic front to find a solution with Iran. And the key point here is that these are sovereign countries acting on their own, outside of that old imperial structure.
And here's the supposed proof of that shift. The source points out that when Pakistan's foreign minister announced a breakthrough, he didn't call up London or Brussels. The lines of communication are totally different now. He was addressing American officials directly on social media. This is presented as a literal rerouting of global power, completely skipping over those old centers of influence. And to frame this as a uniquely American way of doing things, the source makes this really powerful historical comparison. It puts JD Vance's role today next to Robert F. Kennedy's secret back-channel diplomacy during the Cuban Missile Crisis. The idea being presented is that this isn't just something new. It's a return to an American agenda, where our own interests, not old imperial ones, are driving foreign policy. Okay, let's switch gears and see how this same fight is supposedly playing out in the world of money. The source argues that this exact same conflict is happening over trade and even the basic design of our financial system. When it comes to trade, the source points to presidential advisor Peter Navarro, who straight up connects the America First policy to Alexander Hamilton, the guy who started this whole American system idea. So according to this view, this isn't just some new policy, it's bringing back a very, very old one.
But the fight gets even hotter when you start talking about banking.
The source presents this as a huge showdown between Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and the Financial Times, which it calls the mouthpiece of the City of London.
The whole thing started with this story. The Financial Times reported that Bessent wanted to remake the U.S. Federal Reserve in the image of the Bank of England. According to the source, this would have been a massive win for the so-called British system.
Whoa. Bessent's response was nothing short of explosive. He didn't just deny it, he went public and called it tabloid trash, and then accused the FT of just making up a fake policy position. The source presents this incredibly fierce denial as proof of just how high the stakes are in this battle over who controls the money.
So what is this Bank of England model that they're fighting about anyway? Well, the source defines it as the kind of central bank the British system loves, one that's often more focused on keeping international financial markets stable. So by rejecting it so forcefully, Bessent is, in this worldview, basically pledging allegiance to the American system, a system that wants to use the nation's credit to build the real economy of factories and bridges, not just financial games.
All right, let's bring it all home. The source argues that all these different things, in foreign policy, in trade, in banking, they aren't separate events. They're all part of one big, coherent story, the comeback of a lost American tradition.
And these are the core ideas of that tradition. The American system, as the source lays it out, isn't about managing decline or controlling conflicts. It's about building up sovereign nations, building a productive economy, and building a real peace through shared projects and development. And the source claims there's a direct historical line for these ideas. The argument essentially goes like this. Alexander Hamilton was the one who first named the American system. FDR brought it back during World War II. JFK tried to revive it. And now, this viewpoint claims, Donald Trump is the first president since Kennedy to actually put it back at the center of American policy.
So here's the bottom line, the ultimate conclusion from our source material. All these political battles that we think define our time, they're just noise on the surface. The real choice, the fundamental fight, is between these two historical systems, the imperial, financial, British system and the sovereign, productive American system.
And that's where we'll leave it. The source presents a really different, maybe unconventional way of looking at the world today, a hidden choice that it claims goes way beyond the usual political labels. So the question it leaves us with is, when you look at the world through this lens, what do you see?